feel free to ask Mika and Kurt and Dylan, who's about to perform, any and all questions that you have remaining. Um, Introduce Dylan Foley next. Now, I first met Dylan when I performed with Emperor Norton Stationary Marching Band for the first time. And this was a gig that I had no rehearsals for. Just showed up, and I had heard a handful of the songs, and it was at a fetish fashion show in Providence. And so I am, as a good, responsible professional musician, am looking to the people in the band who I think are going to give me the best cues. That would be the band leader, the perceived band leader at the time, and the bassist. And it turned out that there was just this unassuming guy banging on a bass drum who was just gold in giving me everything I needed to know. And that was Dylan, who is, in my opinion, just a genius songwriter, arranger. He is a key member and one of the main songwriters for Emperor Norton Stationary Marching Band. He is a key member of the honk community, and he has other musical endeavors that I've been honored to be a part of as well, and just anything that comes out of him, I'm just fascinated with. And he is, as I understand, recently enamored with Utah Phillips, musician, songwriter, activist, and tonight he is going to both tell us about Utah Phillips, perform some of his work. So please welcome Dylan Foley.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nate. If you're anywhere on the outskirts, please scooch in this way. There's plenty of seats open up over here. Let's scooch in and get ourselves warm. Get in close. Everybody scooch. Plenty of seats out here. So Utah Phillips was a folk singer and hobo, collector of hobo lore and storyteller. And a friend of my mother's, actually. She got to know him later in his life. I got the opportunity to meet him and see him perform shortly before he died in December of 2008. More than anything, though, that's right, come on in. More than anything, though, he was, I think, quintessentially American in his storytelling and his activism and poetry and all that. So you might say this is my take on national identity after a fashion. So this is my tribute to Utah Phillips. Railroading on the Great Divide, nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. It's there you'll find me as years go by, railroading on the Great Divide. In 1914 I started to roam out from Kentucky, no money, no home, and I was drifting along with the tide. Landed out over the Great Divide, railroading on the Great Divide. Nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. It's there you'll find me as years go by, railroading on the Great Divide. Well, it was now around this time that those of you who may have seen me perform before might turn to those who may have not and calmly reassure them that this is in fact what happens when I sit on stage. This and not much more. You will notice no sudden or dramatic change in my instrumental or vocal attack, as it were. It's nice to know there are some things in early 21st century American society that don't change very fast. I am one of those. This is, nevertheless, an American folk song. Did you recognize it as such? Wouldn't blame you if you didn't. They don't play them on the radio anymore. Folk singers hardly ever sing them. That's because they're boring. Folk music is boring. Whack for the light-o and blow ye winds high-ho, hell, that's boring. This is a folk song, as I said, though I am a folk singer at a folk event of sorts. You are ostensibly the folk, n'est-ce pas? That means we own this song together, right?
Yeah.
Means we have inherited certain social obligations which we shall faithfully discharge, right?
Right, you betcha.
Means we're going to sing this song together, goddammit, boring or not. I know who you are. Those of you who do not sing, I will see to it personally that a Mormon missionary is sent to each of your homes. And I don't want to have to remind you one more time that in a consumerist technocracy such as the one we live in, a revolutionary song is any song you choose to sing yourself. Welcome to the revolution. Railroading on the Great Divide, nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. It's there you'll find me as years go by, railroading on the Great Divide. Try it. Hey, railroading on the Great Divide. Nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. It's there you'll find me as years go by, railroading on the Great Divide. A new election on the horizon, ladies and gentlemen. A whole new crop of criminals coming in. Watch out now. As an old ranch hand down in Utah once told me, the only difference between a liberal and a conservative is that a liberal will hang you, but from a lower limb. And these conservatives, you know, when they're not too busy shattering the myth of white supremacy, they are busy insisting that the only answer to any social problem is more punishment. More punishment, bigger prisons, that's right. I, for one, can understand how the conservative mind would be drawn to the concept of penal enlargement. I don't come from voting stock, though, folks. The last person to vote in my family was Uncle Dean Phillips many years ago out in Davis County, Utah. He had a cattle ranch out there, roast cattle. One year, took it upon himself to purchase an old stud bull to build up the herd. An expensive proposition. But the bull took down poorly and it bloated up. You know how a bull will bloat?
No, sure.
Take my word for it if you don't know. They bloat. So he called in the vet. The vet, Wilfred G. Hazen, Ramrod's straight picture of the Old West and the best vet in the West. I worked on a ranch once where he was the vet and never had a sick day the whole time I worked there. I had these black speedballs with a glass tube. He'd blow them down your throat like that, wire you for about 3 days straight. You could dig post holes like a machine. He took one look at that bowl, said, yeah, it's bloated right up, and proceeded in an attempt to sell my uncle about $80 worth of expensive bull de-bloating equipment, which was a rubber bag and a long rubber tube with a stainless steel hook to hang the whole affair on. My uncle said, I do not got to spend $80 giving a bull an enema. He sent the vet packing, went up to his attic to look for something to do the same job except cheaper. He pawed through all of his truck, about 75 years worth of living, and found an old moose call, you know, big at one end like that and tapered down to an end like this. Well, he took the moose call down to the barn and plugged it into the bowl, proceeded to mix up a batch of soapy green disinfectant water and pour it into the moose call. Well, it was going along just fine until the water began to bubble and the moose call began to blow. Do you know what a moose call is for, don't you? It wasn't too long before down out of Farmington Canyon came a big old randy moose with a rack on it like that, peering in through the windows of the barn with one eyeball and a wicked little ear on its face. Scared the great barking Jesus out of that bull, who took off down the road with the moose in hot pursuit with a stream of brownish green bubbles spraying in its wake. Now, around this same time, there was a man by the name of Charlie Bangeter running for the sheriff of Davis County. Charlie Bangeter was a prominent wino and ne'er-do-well thereabouts, thought he'd make an altogether fine sheriff. But his day job was to operate the drawbridge of the Weber River over by Ogden there in Davis County. And he was sitting there at the controls, reading the funny papers, studying on how to be sheriff, one assumes. He heard that moose call blowing from down the road, thought it was a steamship signaling for the bridge to be opened up. So he pulled the lever, the drawbridge opened up, and that bull came running down the road off the edge of the bridge into the river, and it drowned. That's right. Tragic. Now, Charlie Bangeter lost that election for sheriff by 1 vote. It was my uncle. That's right. Said any man who can't hear the difference between a steamboat whistle and a constipated bull with a moose call stuck up its ass don't deserve to be the sheriff of Davis County. Could you argue with the man? I sure couldn't. That right there has formed the basis of my entire political philosophy ever since. You think that's funny? I'll tell you the funniest story I ever heard in my life. You'll notice I start and stop a lot in here because I can't play and I'm afraid to sing. The funniest story I ever heard in my life, the story of the egg-setting horse. There was an old ranch hand out in Troy, Montana. Franklin Hans Sr. Hans Sr. we called him. He bought up the Troy Hotel there in Montana. Now it's the Hans Hotel. And many of his old compatriots, these old wobblies, many of them farm, factory workers, mines and mill steel workers, they'd go in there too old to get their wood in. They'd jungle up at the Hans Hotel there in Troy. And they'd have what they would call jawbone sessions, kind of gather around the fire at night, tell old stories, sing old songs. And I'd take a freight train up there of a time and sit in and listen on them. That was my education. And old Hans would say, yeah, jawbone sessions, that's what we make up all the bullshit we're going to lay on the folklorists when they come into town with their tape recorders in the spring. They make it up, apparently. But he was the first person who ever told me about Charlie Goodnight and Oliver Loving, these old cowboy stories. Now, the egg-setting horse, as I said, the funniest story I've ever heard. Now, I've told this story perhaps 50 times in my career as a performer, and each and every time have been greeted by dead silence and cold, glassy-eyed stares from my audience. And they say the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I am nevertheless going to endeavor to tell this story one final time, anticipating perhaps a slightly higher degree of animation from present company as I've enjoyed on prior occasions. Colonel Charlie Goodnight and Oliver Loving, pioneer settlers of the old Southwest and folk heroes, both of them, founders of the Goodnight Loving Trail, the westernmost of the great cattle trails from El Paso, Texas to Denver, Colorado with a spur into Montana. In years past, I have come to your town and told you the story of the Great Turtle Drive of '86. Told you the story of Oliver and the Fork, and if you missed that one, well, it was a rare beauty. The egg-setting horse, though. One day, Colonel Charlie Goodnight, an elegant figure, loped up to Oliver Loving's cabin in Old Taos, New Mexico, palisaded in those days. Oliver Loving owned the Remuda Inn and raised horses there. Well, Charlie Goodnight dismounted, knocked politely on the door, and after a few minutes of small talk, catching up with his old friend and companion, said, Oliver, as you know, I am a prominent folk hero hereabouts, and I have some important folk hero business to get at. But my fool horse stepped into a chuck hold and broke its leg, and I came by to see if you'd see way clear to selling me a remount. Well, Charlie, said Oliver, I've got an altogether fine beast on my hands. He's got good withers, good breeding, good blood, good wind, but you don't want him. How's that, Oliver? Well, Charlie, as I said, he's a superb beast, but he's an egg-setting horse. He's a what? He's an egg-setting horse, Charlie. Why, damn you, Oliver Loving, for 50 years now I've put up with your rural ribaldries, your rockets rusticana, your fecal badinage. I'm not fixing to spend another 50 years putting up with it, no how. You sell me that damn horse. Egg-setting indeed. So he sold him the horse. Well, Charlie took off down the road in search of folk hero biz. Didn't get any further than the ranch at the end of the street when there was a nest of prairie chicken eggs on the other side of the fence. I'll tell you, that horse vaulted into the air one more time, sunfished once, and did a somersault, cast Charlie Goodnight to the ground, soared over that fence, and sat down on them eggs. Charlie Goodnight was madder than a boiled owl. Pretty mad. He got up, brought that brute out from around that fence back on the road, spun it around so it faced the right direction, mounted it saddle-wise. You will notice that my discourse is littered with small language tests to ensure that we are all welded together as a single unit. He took off down the road once more. Didn't get any further than the old Taos River Bridge, before the river changes course. I'll tell you, that horse vaulted into the air one more time, sunfished twice, cast Charlie Goodnight to the ground, fractured his collarbone, soared over the edge of that bridge, and sat down in the water. Well, Charlie Goodnight was astonished. He got up, slapped the dust out of his breeches with the brim of his hat, clambered down the embankment, waded out into the middle of the river, jerk-reined that dumb brute back up onto the road, spun it around so it faced the other direction, clumb up on it, put the steel to it, rode hell-bent for leather back to Oliver Loving's cabin, where he launched himself from the saddle, ripped the door from its hinges, cast it aside, pulled Oliver Loving out by a tuft of white hair, proceeded to lay a litany of doom and vituperation upon his rapidly aging body, and said, "Damn you, Oliver Loving. I know you told me that was an egg-setting horse, and I didn't believe you. But as I was going by the ranch down the road, over there, some chariot, see that runny stuff going down his rump? He sat down on them eggs. But as I was going by the old Taos River Bridge, before the river changes course, I tell you, that horse vaulted into the air one more time, sunfished twice, cast me to the ground, fractured my collarbone, soared over the edge of that bridge, and sat down in the water. And I want to know why." "Oh, Charlie," said Oliver Loving, "I forgot to tell you. Sits on fish, too." "That's the funniest story I ever heard in my life. What's wrong with you people?" Well, there's no accounting for taste, as they say. I sit in my boxcar and watch all the trees. I shiver alive on a cool autumn breeze. Told my mother I'd find work, but oh, how I lied. I'm living the life on the Great Divide, railroading on the Great Divide. Nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. It's there you find me as years go by, railroading on the Great Divide. Can I have some water? I could do with some water.
Sure.
Any old buddy, just a sip.
I'll find you some. Is there anyone?
Well, I have largely despaired of heroes in these. Oh, thank you very much.
That's beer. You don't want to drink that.
No, oh, yeah, I don't know.
I'll find some
We should not drink more perfect.
Got water. Oh, hey.
Oh, there's water. There's some good old H2O. Dihydrogen monoxide. Bring it forth. Ah, thank you very much. I have largely despaired of heroes in these, the waning days of Babylon. We lost one of the good ones recently. Old Fred Hansen, one of my idols in the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, worked the Gulf ports. He was a believer in job action, his way of saying direct action, you might say. Many times I heard him step up on a soapbox and say something to the effect of, "Fellow workers, we have got to create democracy where we live and work. Democracy between ourselves and our workmates, ourselves and our lovers, ourselves and our children. If we haven't got it there, the biggest ballot box in the world won't give it to us." Yeah. When I first run in with that kind of job action, it was in Salt Lake City many years ago. I was a young man. The old Lamb's Grill on Main Street by the National Theater. It's not there anymore. But I had a friend who worked there at a time. I went in there one day to get a cup of coffee and a sandwich. I was sitting there shooting the breeze with him. I happened to notice he had a teaspoon in his back pocket. All the waiters in this place had a teaspoon hanging out of the back of their pocket. So I asked him, "How come you got a teaspoon in your back pocket?" He said, "The boss has brought in a time and motion study guy, a tailorite. He times your acts, gets you efficient, makes the boss richer." He said, "Every person who comes in here seems to drop their teaspoon or somehow need another. Takes you 45 seconds to go across the room and get a fresh one and bring it back. You can save all that time if you just keep an extra teaspoon in your back pocket." So I went back to my sandwich, and my friend bent over to pick up a bus tray, and I saw his apron swung forward, and he had a string hanging out the front of his pants. They all did. All the waiters in here had this little string hanging out the front of their pants. I said, "What about the string?" He said, "The same time and motion study guy saw the sign that the state put up in the John, says you got to wash your hands after you use the facilities. He says it takes about 1 minute and 30 seconds to do that. You can save all that time if you just pulled your business out with a string." I said, "How do you put it back?" He said, "I generally use the spoon." I'll tell you, the amount of time and energy and resources spent in this country in order to brainwash you into the idea that change is impossible and that the general dilapidated appearance of reality is all there is to the world is Brobdingnagian in its proportion. In reality, folks, change You can enact a social change sometimes by a simple reordering of your priorities, you might say. A little change in perspective. I'd like to sing you a song to that effect. You can join in on the chorus if you have a mind to. You'll get the hang of it pretty quick. As soon as you're born, grown-ups check where you pee. Decide then and there just how you're supposed to be. Girls pink and quiet, boys noisy and blue. Seems like a dumb way to choose what to do. It's only a wee-wee, so what's the big deal? It's only a wee-wee, so why all the fuss? It's only a wee-wee and everyone's got one. There's better things to discuss. Girls must wear makeup, girls' names and girls' clothes. Boys must wear sneakers, but not pantyhose. From the day you are born, grown-ups teach you to dance. And if you get confused, they say, look in your pants. But it's only a wee-wee, so what's the big deal? It's only a wee-wee, so why all the fuss? It's only a wee-wee and everyone's got one. There's better things to discuss. Try it. It's only a wee-wee, so what's the big deal? It's only a wee-wee, so why all the fuss? It's only a wee-wee and everyone's got one. There's better things to discuss. That's right. If I live to be 9, I still won't understand why grown-ups are totally obsessed with their glands. If I touch myself, don't do that, I'm told. They treat me like I might explode. But it's only a wee-wee, so what's the big deal? It's only a wee-wee, so why all the fuss? It's only a wee-wee and everyone's got one. There's bigger things to discuss. Now grown-ups watch closely each move that we make. Boys must not cry and girls must bake cake. It all seems so formal and I think it smells. Let's all be abnormal and act like ourselves. 'Cause it's only a wee-wee, so what's the big deal? It's only a wee-wee, so why all the fuss? It's only a wee-wee and everyone's got one. There's better things to discuss. Sing that last line. Better things to discuss. One more time. Better things to discuss. Give yourselves a hand on that one, folks. That's a spot of wisdom for you, folks. Better things to discuss. Get that tattooed on the inside of your eyelids. You see it every time you blink. Stick your head out the window, boy, see how it feels. Number 9's are coming the fastest on wheels. At 90 an hour, she whistles with pride, thundering over the great divide. Railroading on the great divide. Nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. It's there you'll find me as years go by. Railroading on the great divide. Speaking of heroes, old Idaho Blackie, branch secretary of the IWW, Coeur d'Alene, Iowa. A hard, radical heart, hates fascists. Another one of my heroes. Unfortunately, his property there in Coeur d'Alene does butt up against the compound of the Church of Aryan Nations. This is hardly a match made in heaven. I went down there the other day to see if he was still alive. There he was, duck hunting from the front porch. He's too old now to do what he used to do, which is get a crate of whiskey and go out into the woods and get so high you can go duck hunting with a rake. There he was out there blazing away, and he got a duck, and it fell, but it fell into the compound of the Church of Aryan Nations. So he got up and hobbled around the fence, these advanced stages of crusty old farthood, you see. Got out into the churchyard there. These neo-Nazis pretend to be Christians, you see. But then most Christians do. The whole thing is built on the site of an old mine camp, which is appropriate if you think about it. Nazis, mine camp. Anyway, he went to lay hold of the duck, picked it up, and Reverend Butler, the head of the Church of Aryan Nations, no spring chicken himself, launched from the back door of the church, and there he was in his jack boots and his suntans and Sam Brown belt and armband with a swastika on it and a 30 mission crush cap with a patent leather bill on it. He snatched that duck away from Idaho Black and allowed, whereas whatever the good Lord decided to deliver upon that land belonged to the Church of Aryan Nations. Well, they altercated some. It was interesting to watch. Finally, Reverend Butler drew himself up to the full height of his Prussian majesty and declared, "Good sir, we are going to settle this dispute in the manner of true Aryan gentlemen. We're going to take turns, and I'll try to be delicate here, take turns kicking each other in our magic parts, if you get my drift. And the one left standing will get to keep this duck." Well, Idaho thought about this for a minute and said, "Good sir, I agree. However, as one stipulation, since it was my shot that felled the bird, I get first crack at it." Reverend Butler agreed to this stipulation, put a slight gait to his legs, and steeled himself for what was about to come. Idaho Blackie tottered back about 5 or 6 steps, reached into some deep, private recess of his soul for energy hoarded for just such an occasion. Flew forward, delivered a right smart kick to Reverend Butler's magic parts, who fell to the ground in excruciating agony, blanched out, turned completely white, which is what he'd been trying to do all his life anyway. He vomited violently into the dirt, rocking back and forth in pain, then gradually gathered his wits, dug his heels into the dirt, reached with an old gnarled hand to grab the knob of a willow tree, and slowly, excruciatingly pulled himself to a standing position. He adjusted his cuffs and his collar and his hat. He drew a deep, dignified breath and turned to face Idaho Blackie, who looked right back at him and said, "Keep the duck." I'd like to leave you with a memento mori, folks. If you don't know, that's just a fancy way of saying you're all gonna die. Now here's some bullshit. It's a 2-parter. The first part is a delightfully terse little ditty by the late great Shel Silverstein. It goes like this. They're testing the bomb as I'm singing this song. They say not to worry 'cause nothing can go wrong. They're testing the bomb as I'm singing this song. They say not to worry 'cause nothing can... And the second part, folks. A little illustration of the fleeting and urgent nature of your time here on this pale blue dot. If you please, a story. Colonel Charlie Goodnight and Oliver Loving, pioneer settlers of the old Southwest and folk heroes, both of them, founders of the Goodnight Loving Trail, the greatest of the westernmost cattle trails from El Paso, Texas to Denver, Colorado with a spur into Montana. In years past, I've come before you and told you the story of the great Turtle Drive of '86, told you the story of the egg-setting horse, and if you missed that one, well, it was a rare beauty. It is seldom that I have spoken of the manner of their demise, how it was that Colonel Charlie Goodnight and Oliver Loving finally shuffled off this mortal coil. Well, Charlie Goodnight was 96 years old, and Oliver Loving was 82 if he was a day. They decided to go out on one little final hunt together. So they loped off into the direction of Old Dolores, a popular cattle town there on the old Goodnight Loving Trail. It's a ghost town now. There they were, 4 cataracts stumbling blind among the rocks, crazed on hooch and sunlight, trying to find an elk. They were apprehended by the tribal police. The place had long since become a Native American reserve. They just didn't know that. Now those 2 old sorry reprobates were finally going to get theirs. They were escorted before the chief of elders, who looked them up and down and said, "We know who you are. You are Colonel Charlie Goodnight and Oliver Loving, pioneer settlers of the old Southwest and folk heroes, both of you. Founders of the great Goodnight Loving Trail, the westernmost of the great cattle trails from El Paso, Texas to Denver, Colorado with a spur into Montana. You have nevertheless transgressed upon holy ground and must pay the penalty. You'll be put to death. However, as a single recompense, we offer you the choice of your demise." The chief had gone to Yale University some years before and majored in law and freshwater biology, as I understand, but there's no work in the city, so he returned to the reservation to find work as a shaman, which is what you do under similar circumstances, and me too. Well, after appraising them of the fact that they could choose the manner of their own demise, he said, "Furthermore, As you have both led lives fraught with folk magic, when you are dead, we are going to incorporate your folk magic into the tribe. We are going to skin you both and make your hides into canoes. What they were going to do with canoes in that part of the country, I don't know, but I don't make foreign policy, so. Well, Charlie Goodnight had first crack at it, asked for a Navy action muzzle loader, wanted it double charged, wanted the sprue left on the ball, thought he ought to splatter a little bit given the nature of the circumstances. He raised the pistol majestically to his silvered head, let out an impassioned plea for handgun control, and that was it for Charlie Goodnight. Oliver Loving had next crack at it. He was always long on courage and short on brains, cast himself into a heavy ponder while the chief and the elders were cleaning up at the showers. "What's it going to be, Oliver?" they said. "Chief, bring me a kitchen fork." Well, there wasn't a kitchen fork for 100 miles square in any direction, so they had to form a raiding party. Had an old-timer thereabouts who knew how to do a raiding party. I think they raided a convent in downtown Albuquerque, got the fork, promised to mail it back. Went 3 days back, all the way back to the reservation. There was Oliver Loving still tied up to a live jack oak broiling in the sun. They handed him the fork. Without hesitation, he proceeded to stab himself all over the surface of his wrinkled and withered body, gouts of blood spurting and splattering in every direction. The chief said, "Desist instantly." He persisted in his folly, stabbing and stabbing away, and as he drew perilously close to death, fixed the chief with a steely gaze and said, "Chief, you may kill me, but you ain't making me no fucking canoe." Yeah, skinny old timer around old Cheyenne Railroad in Wyoming's the best in the land. A long steel rail and a short cross tie, thundering over the great divide, railroading on the great divide. Nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. It's there you'll find me as years go by, railroading on the great divide. I think that's it then.
Wow.
I wasn't prepared for questions, so I'm not going to ask you. If you want to talk, just come up and talk to me later.
All right.
Alrighty.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.